What is up, beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode of the Lifting Life podcast. So it's been a little while. It was going to be 2 weeks because some of the episodes that I had scheduled, I had to cancel, which was a little bit difficult. But we are now here back with another episode. Now, this one is just a straight up Q&A. I'm going to be having a guest on next week, which will be a really exciting episode, plus another one with the coaches of DBD. If you're not familiar, we have now announced that there is an additional coach as the team, which is Beck. He was actually on a previous one, but we didn't actually announce anything. We didn't make it clear that he is a coach with the team. So that's what that is. But I'm just going to kind of crack on with my own Q&A, some questions from something on my Instagram. I was incentivized to do this because I was looking at the number of people listening, and I'll be honest, it was way more than I thought it was. I thought it was all three of you. Turns out it's a couple more. So genuinely really appreciate the support. We've had quite a bit so far. The people who have shared it or found it insightful, do let me know if you are listening to this and you find it helpful. But for the time being, we'll assume you do, and we're just going to crack on anyway. So the very first question that we have, what is the very first step when you what is the very first step you take when programming a new start? That was awfully read. Okay, so let's say someone has just contacted for programming, or let's say that you're just starting your own. Obviously, there's different protocols. The first thing I do is I ask to see what they've been doing so for context of the volume that they've been tolerating, the frequency of the movements, and then we can kind of start to work backwards of what's been effective, what should we keep as a base framework, and what should we revamp. Most people are coming for coaching because they've either been spinning their wheels or what they've been doing has been very unstructured. So that can give you our start point. The second thing that we always do is ask for as many videos as they have access to. So that could mean literally every bit of training, because what we need to do is immediately start to pinpoint where issues are coming from that have caused this stagnation, or that we are just going to work towards. So for instance, if we get sent some videos and we're like, okay, the acceleration within your squat is the biggest issue without question, we know what movement selection we might use at the beginning to start to focus on that. So the first thing is always, what have they done? Where are they coming from? And what are things looking like already? So we know what the first steps are. Where someone wants to go isn't as immediately relevant. So the long-term goals, because realistically, if someone's like, I want a total 600, I'm like, cool, you can't squat for shit yet. So we're going to start there. But that's not to say if someone's like, well, my goals are powerlifting, that's obviously very relevant. So take that comment with a pinch of salt. So the second question, training when you have other commitments. So there's a couple of things to this. First of all is understanding how little you really need to do to make progress. And then the degree of training you're already doing. So let's say you're training 6 days a week, and because some of our listeners are uni students, we'll say it's exam season. Well, what's the goal right now? Is it to sustain training? Are we prepping for competition? We're gonna assume not. If you have other commitments and bits going on, let's say that we're just in season training, we can get away with 2 sessions of maintaining most of the movements, or we could separate that for time scale to go, okay, we want to get 2 squat sessions in, ideally 2 bench and 1 deadlift in a week. Now, if we can fit those into 2 or 3 sessions, we'll cut it down. The accessories, really, the necessity of them is very low. And so we'll just try to take in the least possible work to sustain the point we are at, or even to change our focus point. We might just go, right now, we just want to address base technical stuff to maintain the relative intensity of training, allow us to get something out of the training and make it still fulfilling, while also minimizing the length of time that you're there for, minimizing the amount of focus or the amount of arousal that you potentially need so you can get in and out the gym. I think most people, if you're on 5 or 6 days of training, I would already ask you to justify those 5 or 6, the 5th or 6th session. More often than not, I don't see them as overly needed. I kind of favor, I always say to new clients, especially, I am a minimalist coach. What's the least work we can do to make progress? What's the least volume to give ourselves space? That's not to say that we don't push. We do work very hard. But I'm not about throwing everything at the wall. You'll see some coaching and programming that has 8 or 9 movements in a session. I would argue the quality of anything after 6, and I would argue the value of anything after 5 or 6. So I would just look to reduce your training, look to find means of maintaining a relative intensity with less taxing movements. So things like tempo work and so on. And then just like saying to yourself, right now it's not priority, and that's okay. we're powerlifters by hobby 9 times out of 10. That 10th person is competing at a national or international level. And even then, it's not paid work. So we do have to go, what else is vital right now? What else do we need to actually put our time and focus into? And quite frequently, that's going to be your studying, your job, maybe even your relationships. And that's okay. Okay, the next one. Do you ever fall guilty to comparison? Let's start as a coach, then as an athlete, and then just as an individual. As a coach, oh, okay, that's shit. Because no, not really. There are a couple of coaches who I look to see what they're doing because I find them interesting or inspiring. So the likes of Bryce Lewis, who, if you follow my Instagram, you know that he's been helping me out directly. And the way he works, I find very motivating and interesting. Fortunately, we actually share a huge amounts of points of view, but I would say that he has more experience than me. I have 10 years of experience and he's far more experienced than I am still. And he just works with such a variety, and his means of thinking inspire me to push harder for my quality. There are other coaches who I think that they are interesting, but I wouldn't say that I compare myself. So the likes of Mike Tashir, I'm picking incredibly high level coaches, but because across the UK, I would say there's not much to compare myself to. There aren't many people offering services, and the services that they do offer, I don't see as competition or to be marking myself against, because we're kind of trying to rebuild a baseline standard. As an athlete, I do and I don't. The number 174, 75, depending on your federation across the world, aren't people I necessarily follow nor compare myself to. So for instance, there's Taylor Atwood in my class, possibly or debatably the best powerlifter of all time. I don't care. I mean, I love him. His work is phenomenal, but I don't see it as comparison. I see where I go next as my comparison. I compare to where I've been, and that can be really tricky. Or I compare to my expectations, and that's difficult. But to other lifters, less so. The only time that it does start to bug me a little is about the rate of progress. Now, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I can be painfully impatient because I really want to go a long way, and seeing people make huge leaps. I mean, I've been doing this for, like I say, for 10 years. I have seen numerous people make jumps at different times in their careers. And I've coached people and seen them make better progress than I do, which always reminds me I'm a better coach than I am an athlete. Sorry, get my daily dose of Monster. So for comparison, to some extent, as an individual, about where I am in my life, as opposed to where I feel I should be, not anymore. I used to, though. I really felt like I was behind. I really felt like I wanted to do more. I'm actually feel like I'm doing huge quantities, and I'm immensely proud of where I'm at. So less so than ever before. And obviously this is a common thing for a lot of people, but I would be amiss to pretend that I suffer from the same issue completely. Where do you see your training this time next year? I ain't got a fucking clue. I am stronger than I've ever been, but I'm figuring it out still. My body's not healthy by any means. So I don't know. I don't know what I intend to do. I don't know if I intend to compete. I don't know if I intend to stop. If I'm honest, I've considered retiring from powerlifting and just taking. I think one thing I'd like to do within the next, let's say, 20-ish months, is take 3 full months off of powerlifting, which I've not done in at least 10 years. Sorry, in at least 8 years. Taking a full scope away from the main lifts, like just doing some other work. The problem is when I sustain competing at 74 kilos, and always have, that there's not much to do in terms of like changing of training, because I'm not putting on loads of mass because I can only go so far. So I'd like to do that at some point, but specifically where I'll be, I have no clue. What's your go-to song for a big lift? Fucking hell. Mine's Not Normal. So I adore Billie Eilish for hype, as well as Dermot Kennedy. And then my just standard line is with NF. If you don't know who NF is, please go listen to every single album. Specifically, the album Search is phenomenal. Just unquestionably my favorite performer, singer, rapper, whatever, across the world. My pre-training routine and habits. Okay, I have ADHD and I'm a little bit OCD, and I am such a creature of habit that I have absolutely tons. Like my morning routine is always the same: of get up, go set up the computer, sit at the computer, have my coffee, like the routine of checking my emails, going through and clearing, replying to all of the messages that I have. Then it will be make a shake, one scoop protein with creatine. Then I will have a pack of chicken noodles, low fat. 30 minutes after that, I will then have a shower, brush my teeth in the shower, and then brush my teeth again afterwards. Don't ask me why. And then get changed and ready for the gym. That is my normal habit. There are little bits among that, but it's boring. So that's probably my standard. What's more valuable in lifting, talent or experience? Experience, unquestionably. People who rely on talent are usually shite, because there's a baseline, yes, and they will probably make a big leap and then they will disappear all the time. I have seen it happen so many times. It's actually terrifying. Like such talents and interest of these young lifters or just people who've been introduced to the sport at a random point. Then they burn out, disappear, and you never see them again. So yeah, experience and work ethic. That's going to be your factor of like if you can stay in it through when things get a little bit difficult or when progress stagnates. Like that mindset and mentality is what's going to dictate the long-term achievements. Thoughts on building community and relationships in coaching? Yeah, absolutely should. It's harder than you think. It's not as lazy as people try to make it. And be very careful of what you give of yourself to that community. It is fragile and it is going to be reliant on your place in that community. And I think people have very good online communities and very poor in-person communities. When you're building that in, I don't know whose question this was because it's really good. Like relationships with clients, for instance, know that that is that is within the description of your role, but knowing those lines of like, I cannot help you with that. That is not my place. This isn't my place to comment. Like figuring those out. I have unquestionably been on the back end of that where I've made mistakes, where I've tried to help people and then in their own situations, they've spiraled and I've taken on such a weight of that. It's been difficult. I've considered people immensely close friends and that friendship fracturing has been really difficult in the past. I have gotten much, much better with that. What is your ideal athlete? Someone who I can tell relatively early on if someone's got a degree of potential just in how they learn and apply, but also their mentality. I'm going to give one specific example because I don't know if she'll listen to this, but Amelia, who is our sub junior, she just won nationals at the British Junior Lico competition and in British powerlifting. She has immense potential and her mindset and just ability to just work as instructed, but also like wanting to know more about the process. That is my ideal client. Someone who is like, so you want someone with good mindset towards training. You want someone who wants to understand the process so that they can commit to it and then just does. I don't want anyone just to be like, you told me to do it, so I'll do it, because there's just that little bit missing of a buy-in of their understanding, and then the application can suffer. What was next? What's the next Lifting Life event? So if you don't know, I organized an event called the Lifting Life, which is the same as the name of the podcast, because it was about this principle of like trying to help people and within the world of lifting, but also the idea is to lift people's lives. I've no idea when the next event is. So James, if you are listening to this, please help me plan one. I would really appreciate it. The most important lesson you've learned from your years of training specifically. Okay. That is tough. I honestly don't know. I think that knowing that things come and go at different phases and speeds, no, that's not it. Even though that is a valuable lesson, that's not the most valuable. I don't know. I'll have a think about it. There is so much you learn over that time. I think it's actually learning what that bracket is of, okay, what's the least I can do and what's the most I have to do and going to be asked of me, and kind of an accountability to a standard. When you're not competing, you don't have to go balls to the wall. It isn't some fucking war and you're not a warrior. You can do things calmly and make good progress and you don't have to push yourself. I'm learning that still. Most important lesson you've learned from your years of coaching? Fucking hell. That some people won't share your passion, and that's okay. For some people, Powerlifting will be a hobby that they'll drop and they'll go away from, and you'll see things in them like, you could go so far, and they might not care, and that's okay. I'd say that's a really early lesson that I learned, where to some people you're just supporting something that they're not that fussed about, and I think some coaches still fall to this, where they will get really caught up and push a client and try and do X, Y, and Z, and really they don't care enough, and you're actually making it a worse experience for them. Busy gym or quiet gym? Quiet. Couldn't give a fuck. I don't like people being around. They're distracting, annoying. What's it like being famous? I am way more infamous than I am famous. I don't know. I've no idea. Do you think you're rebuilding your coaching business better than your previous one? If you don't know the context of this, I can't be asked to explain it to you right now. I actually recorded a whole podcast on this and then deleted it, so I might come back to this. But I think DBD is going to be the greatest possible service available in powerlifting in time. Do I think it's better than my old coaching in quality? For two reasons. One, I'm way more experienced, so yes. Two, I don't work with a dipshit, so yes. And three, I work with an amazing group of people who are incredibly passionate. The community that we have is great. And also, it's no longer named after me. So DBD, Dedicated by Design, can be its own thing and develop and grow. And that's been something that's really beneficial. What's it like chatting with your idol? So these are the calls with Bryce. I fangirl real hard. Bryce has ADHD. Bryce loves cameras. Bryce is a phenomenal lifter. His ability to vocalize his thoughts and to do what I'm struggling with right now is phenomenal and truly inspiring. And I love his work. So it's really cool and a bit weird, but I love it. How's training at the moment? It's actually really good. It's very different because I've been working with Bryce to kind of, restructure my programming to find the best means of progress. And that's been really fun, but it means there's a lot of change. So I'm not doing anything that's like overly interesting. I'm hitting volume PBs and so on and still making good progress, but it's a new territory with a baseline of strength that I've never had before. And so I'm kind of just seeing how to build it. It's a bit slower. No, it's not. That's a fucking lie. It's just a bit broader. And so that's going to take longer to come into fruition. And I'm okay with that. How soon do you see trends and patterns with newer lifters? It depends how good they are at sticking to the programming. If someone overshoots, undershoots over and over again, doesn't apply things, then it's actually really difficult. Normally, I can predict once I've had someone as a client for like 3 months, that's enough baseline data to get better projections going forward. So whether that be response to certain movements, you've learned a lot in 3 months. You should have had a decent application of multiple different movements, or you've applied lower amounts of movements, but for longer, and therefore have even more data on those individual ones. So that gives you a baseline, but those things change over time due to new external factors or due to variables within the training itself or different intensities or times of the year around competitions and so on. So you get a baseline pretty early, but getting detailed data on any client is way longer. If someone gave you 10,000, there's only 4 more questions and I'm going to wrap it up after this because I wanted this to be short and sweet, but if someone gave you £10,000, no strings attached, what would you do with it? Okay, so here's a funny fact. And if you're listening to this, everyone should feel bad because I posted something saying this question actually a while back because I was going to do it. I wanted to invest in someone. I wanted to put money forward and invest in something and take a fucking gamble. And I asked people this question. Their answers were so disappointing that I changed my mind. And my answer is I would go and invest in someone else. I have the means to invest in myself and develop things as I'd like to. And I only put money into things when I feel like it's suitable. If you gave me that money, I'd give it away. I would try to give it to someone else to do something unique with their life or situation. If they had the passion to do so. Okay. How far into the future does your planning, of clients go? On paper, not terribly far. In my head, like 6 months, because it's somewhat predictable. And you also need to know like what they're trying to achieve and how those things. So let's say that someone's got a poor baseline of technique in their squat. I'm closing my eyes so I can envision what I'm going to talk about here. Okay, so the introduction is going to be lower volume so that we can kind of see how that thing is going to move. Then once we've got the baseline together, well, let's say this is 1 month, so month 2 now, we're going to go to the application of that skill and start to do it as a broad baseline for their squat. So then we're going to refine that onto the block 3. Block 3 is giving us an opportunity to go, okay, do we need to broaden, or do we need to now, or can we now get something out of this? So that might be block 4, that we actually start to do something where we're testing these things and we've pushed through to a new level of strength. So that's 4, and then potentially 5 and 6 as to where we rebroaden. So normally, like, yeah, 4 months ahead. That was so generic, by the way. How is benching 5 days a week going? I'm not doing it. I was going to. So this is something I talked to Bryce about in principle, the higher frequency suits people and it has a good result. You tend to see a response to it that is positive, but I didn't do it because it's not what me and Bryce discussed. We were trying to figure out a new means of developing my bench from where it was. My bench is pretty good, but I haven't done much linear work with it for fucking ages. And so we thought we'd give it a shot. And so benching 5 times a week, we'll have to hold off just a little bit longer. I would like to give it a go at some point, but not just yet. I want to leave something in the tank to experiment with at a later date. So that's going to be it. That will be it. Nice, short, simple, and sweet. And it means that I can actually throw this episode up, which I'm going to post it straight away and just not tell anyone and see if anyone notices. And then I'll post it probably on Monday. If there's anything you'd like me to discuss, or someone, if you'd like to be on the podcast and there's a topic you want to talk about, tell me and I will have you on. There is nothing off limits. And it can be some real chats. It doesn't have to be just about powerlifting because I don't care and it's my podcast. And that's all. Thank you for listening to this. To the support we've had has been phenomenal. I'll speak to you beautiful people next week. When I say every Friday, I mean when I can. All right. Give me some help. Right. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much, guys. Shut up, Callum.